My name is Ethan Mercer, and for years I believed patience could keep a family together. I learned the hard way that silence only teaches people how much disrespect you'll tolerate. The breaking point came on my mother Linda's birthday. The living room buzzed with music and easy laughter. Relatives filled every corner of the house, balancing drinks while congratulating my mother on another year. I had spent the entire morning making sure everything was ready. The decorations were hung, the food was prepared, and every repair needed before the party had quietly been handled by me, just like always. Then my stepfather Graham walked over carrying a stack of paper plates. He handed one to me with a grin that made everyone look his way. "The help eats outside," he said. For one heartbeat, I thought I'd misunderstood him. Then laughter spread across the room. Not nervous laughter, real laughter. People looked at me as though I were part of the entertainment. I searched for my mother's face, hoping she'd finally say something. She didn't. She simply adjusted the candles on her birthday cake, avoiding my eyes as though nothing unusual had happened. The paper plate suddenly felt impossibly heavy. I quietly turned toward the hallway before anger could take over. 7 years. That was how long I had secretly paid every mortgage payment on this house, every property tax, every insurance bill, every plumbing repair, every leaking roof, every broken appliance. No one had ever asked how everything always worked. They simply accepted that the lights stayed on and the bills somehow disappeared. To them, I had become useful, reliable, invisible. It hadn't always been obvious. At first, it was little things. Family messages somehow forgot to include me. Weekend plans were made without asking if I was available. Conversations stopped whenever I entered the room. Graham disguised every insult as a joke. Since everyone laughed, questioning him only made me seem oversensitive. My mother always apologized later. "You know how Graham is," she'd whisper, as if that excused years of humiliation. It never did. The truth was even stranger. I had purchased this house long before my mother married Graham. After my father passed away, he left me enough money to build a secure future. I invested wisely and bought the property in my own name. When Graham eventually moved in, he gradually started calling it our house. I never corrected him. Sometimes silence feels easier than endless arguments. But silence has a price. That night, someone finally arrived to collect it. The front door opened just as I reached the hallway. My Aunt Margaret stepped inside carrying a small leather bag. She paused, scanned the silent room, then frowned. "So," she asked calmly, "nobody told them yet?" The laughter disappeared instantly. Every conversation stopped. Even the music suddenly seemed too loud. Graham forced a smile. "Told us what?" Aunt Margaret ignored him at first. She looked directly at me instead, almost apologetically. "You were going to tell them tonight, weren't you?" I slowly shook my head. I didn't think I needed to. Confusion spread across the room. My mother looked from me to Aunt Margaret, searching for an explanation. "What is everyone talking about?" she asked quietly. Aunt Margaret set her bag on the dining table. "The house goes on the market tomorrow morning." The words landed harder than any shout could have. Graham laughed once, but it sounded forced. "That's impossible." "No," Aunt Margaret replied. "It's already arranged." I stepped forward and gently placed the paper plate on the table. My hands surprised me. They weren't shaking. Months earlier, I had noticed subtle changes. Graham had started asking strange questions about ownership papers, property taxes, and future inheritance. My mother kept mentioning retirement plans that somehow never included me. None of it was direct. But together, it painted a clear picture. Instead of confronting them, I contacted a property attorney. Within an hour, every question was answered. The title belonged solely to me. No shared ownership, no legal claim, no rights created simply because someone lived there. Everything was documented. Every mortgage payment came from my account. Every repair invoice carried my name. Every receipt had been carefully organised for years, more from habit than suspicion. 2 weeks before the birthday party, I quietly signed a listing agreement with a real estate agent. Professional photographs were taken while everyone was away. Showings were scheduled. The paperwork was complete. No announcements, no arguments, no drama. Only preparation. Graham stared at me. "You can't sell our home." I unlocked my phone and opened the listing. Bright photographs filled the screen. Every room looked polished and welcoming, stripped of every emotional attachment. I turned the display toward him. It's not your home, I said evenly. It's mine. For the first time since I'd known him, Graham had absolutely nothing to say. My mother finally met my eyes. You never talked to me. I tried, I answered softly. You just stopped listening. The silence that followed said more than years of conversations ever had. No one tried to laugh after that. The room that had been filled with music and birthday chatter now felt hollow. Relatives avoided looking at one another, suddenly unsure whose side they were supposed to take. Graham stood frozen, staring at the phone in my hand as though the listing might disappear if he looked long enough. It has to be a mistake, he muttered. It isn't, Aunt Margaret replied. The first showing is tomorrow morning. My mother slowly sat down, her birthday forgotten. The candles still burned on the untouched cake, their tiny flames flickering in the heavy silence. You really sold it? She whispered. I listed it, I answered. The sale comes next. She looked at me with disbelief, but I didn't recognize the expression as concern. It wasn't about how I had been treated. It was about what they were about to lose. Graham stepped forward, trying to regain control. We're family. You can't throw family out. I met his eyes without raising my voice. The moment you called me the help, you made it clear how you saw me. No one defended him. No one defended me either. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I picked up my keys, nodded politely to Aunt Margaret, and walked toward the door. Behind me, questions turned into arguments, but none of them followed me outside. The next morning, the property listing became public. Within hours, relatives began sending careful messages. Is this true? What happened? Can we talk? Graham called repeatedly. I let every call go to voicemail. My mother sent only one text, we need to talk. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the years I had quietly paid every mortgage, utility bill, insurance premium, and repair. The urgency wasn't about the hurt they had caused. It was about the consequences they were finally facing. The house attracted several strong offers and sold much faster than expected. The closing was smooth, with no disputes and no surprises. Everything had been prepared long before that birthday party. I never returned to the property. Instead, I bought a smaller home across town. It wasn't grand, but it was peaceful. Every room belonged to me, and every memory I created there was one I chose for myself. Months later, my mother called again. This time she apologized, quietly and sincerely. I accepted her words, but forgiveness didn't erase the past. As for Graham, I never heard from him again. Walking away from that house wasn't my greatest loss. It was my greatest freedom. Because respect is worth far more than property. And the day they decided I was only the help was the day I realized they no longer deserved a place in my life.